As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trum and Catherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. What they both know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. In a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and we'll discuss and share what has contributed to both our success.
Oh my goodness.
We are having some fun this morning.
We sure are. Well, welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. We are having a little bit of technical issues, so we're not live on all of our channels, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and just push on through anyway. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. Catherine and I, as the intro was saying, we are life coaches. We are also passionate about human resources. And today is our 18th episode, and we are going to be talking about a pretty serious subject, Catherine. Today, we're going to be talking about burnout and overwhelm, which are some things that you and I both know really well, and something that I think is going to be a big subject for today. But before we get in, let's talk a little bit about our weekends. You've been traveling again, Missy girl.
Oh, I don't sit still anymore, Jen. Yeah, I am at my parents' condo in Cincinnati, Ohio. Drinking from the family mug. This is my family, for those of you watching live or watching the video on replay. I came in for my godson, my oldest nephew's high school graduation. So shout out to Carson. He is one of the loves of my life. I seriously may start crying. It's been a very emotional weekend. I'm very proud of him, and I love him very much. So I'm so happy to have been able to be here with him and my family and celebrating this major milestone in his life. So happy to be here. And happy Memorial Day. Happy Memorial. I mean, just sat on the couch yesterday with my dad and talked about his time at Fort Carson. Ironically, nephew's name is Carson. Spent a couple of years at Fort Carson out in Colorado and just learned about his time in the Army. And it's been very special, just sitting on the couch for hours with my parents. And I have a dear colleague in HR who recently lost her father, and I had coffee with her last week. So it feels all the more special to prioritize family and to actually make the trip here and be here with my family. It's been really, really special. What about you? Tell us about your weekend.
My weekend's been good. I have a sister who she and I have been somewhat estranged over the past couple of years. And so being able to reconnect and spend time together, we went and watched an ABBA, not the big hologram thing that I know that's out there, but it was just a really cool Southern Oregon version of people getting up and singing ABBA songs. And it was really special. It was a good opportunity to connect with someone who I've been a little bit disconnected from over the past couple of years in a really good way. It's like, I know for myself that I've gone so far in terms of, evolving and becoming a version of myself that I can be truly proud of. And it's pretty amazing to be able to kind of now find this relationship with someone in my family that we've had some scarring, and now and we're being able to really find what our relationship looks like now that, we're kind of these newer versions of ourselves. It's wild. She's only 18 months younger than me. And I'm almost 50. So this is a long relationship, and one that's worth, it's worth cultivating and worth putting, the love and time into it. But it's work and it's effort. And so that was Friday. And then the rest of the weekend, I'm not kidding, I spent time doing chores and spend time relaxing. I'm reading an amazing book right now. Spent a few hours on the couch, enjoying that. So it was really, really good.
Okay. I have to know what book for some reason. What book?
It's a book. It's about narcissism. And
Okay.
it's called It's Not You. And
Yep.
Romani, what is her last name? Anyway, she's amazing. And
Yes.
this is, I think, her fourth or fifth book. And
Yes.
it's just an amazing, amazing book just about the different relationships in our lives. And it really has been an amazing self-reflection. It's like
Yeah.
I know that everybody has the capability to behave in ways that have narcissism,
Narcissistic.
narcissistic tendencies,
Absolutely. Yep.
right? And so it's like that for me has been a really great learning thing, especially for someone in HR, to not only recognize it in myself, those little
Yeah.
things that I do, the little things I
Yeah.
might say, but
Yes.
also how it shows up in coworkers and in leaders and, other people in my life. And, again, it's like, it's one thing to kind of label an individual as this or as that, which is very risky and very, kind of landmines everywhere. But it's a
Yeah.
thing to recognize we all have these different tendencies within ourselves. So it's really great to be able to kind of have that awareness around myself and also the awareness around how people are the way they are sometimes because it just don't make no sense.
Jen, it's so funny you bring that up because I have a lot of windshield time in my life lately, traveling to speaking engagements and now I have a fancy term. I'm a transitional consultant for a TAM manager position near the town of Telluride. It's called Mountain Village. They're like the loves of my life. I fell in love with this organization. I was meant to like serve and meet all of the people in this organization. And now I'm ratcheting up a little bit. And during one of my recent drives, a lot of windshield time, I heard a podcast by Mel Robbins, and she was interviewing this doctor, and Ramini, I can't remember her name, but it's obviously like a promotion for her book.
Yeah.
And that podcast episode caught my attention like no other podcast episode has in a while. It really got my brain thinking about like, am I a narcissist? Do I have narcissistic tendencies?
Mm-hmm.
Who in my life is a narcissist? What role am I playing when these people in my life show up as a narcissist? And I think statistically very few people are technically narcissists, but I love
Yeah.
how you articulated it. We all have the ability to present narcissistically from time to time, if that makes sense. Some of us more predominantly than others. And man, I downloaded that book. It is next in line in my queue. Yeah, I'm a big audio person, so I will be listening to it. I already have it planned out. I'm going to listen to it on my run today because I haven't run yet today. When hanging out with my mom in the kitchen, and I'm also going to listen to it on my drive down to Telluride this week. It really caught my attention, and it's not like, it doesn't seem to be this very diagnostic-y type of thing. It's really educational on how we show up when somebody is exhibiting narcissistic tendencies in our life. I don't know. It really caught my attention. And I know we're like, I don't know. I don't even think we're way off topic because when I think about overwhelm and burnout, I do know that a lot of overwhelm and burnout can come from our relationships. We all know that, you don't quit your job, you quit your boss. So if we feel like our boss is narcissistic or there are other people in our lives that are narcissistic, is that leading to any sort of overwhelm or burnout? So I think there are a lot of tie-ins with what we're going to be talking about today. I digress.
No, I think you're right on. I think the relationships that we're in and the burdens sometimes we put on ourselves due to the relationships, right? The wanting to make sure we're pleasing everybody.
Oh my Lord.
All of we can start kind of tiptoeing into that, but girl, you're going in the right direction. And then, sometimes it is, recognizing those other individuals in our lives who may not actually be reciprocating in the way that, we're putting in all this effort, right? So it's like, how do we start to like really become more aware of the truth? And what is that truth? And so, okay, well, let's jump in. I think we're there. Let's jump in.
I think we're there. Let's go.
Question number one I've got for us this week is, can you share a specific example where you recognized yourself in a state of extreme overwhelm and burnout? And what did you do?
I sure can. It's very, very vivid in my mind. And the reason why I know it qualifies under burnout, we all know the definition of it. It's not just stress. It's not just overwhelm. It's a lack of managing ourselves during a chronically stressful period, right? It's elongated, it's over a long amount of time. And what happened for me was during COVID. It was when I went from, 22 years of a quote unquote 9-to-5 role, going into an office, working in HR, and coming home. I just had my life. I had led the same life for 22 years. Next thing you know, I'm working from home. I'm not leaving my house. If you remember the beginning of COVID, particularly, like we all thought we were going to die. Like the world was kind of ending for a little period there. There was a lot of fear. I was afraid. The leadership of the organization was afraid. Employees were afraid. We were trying to find the right balance between office staff and field staff. So, our bus drivers, all the regulation with the FTA. Then the office staff were like, well, I have to come in. I have to work. So we're trying to figure out work from home policies, trying to adhere to all the different regulations. I was working instead of my normal healthy habits of running in the morning and going into the office. I was getting up, I was running to the living room, and I was working from sun up to sundown, and I was stressed to the bejesus. I was stressed all the time. I was worried about myself. I was worried about my family. I was worried about the organization. I was trying to figure, just putting all the policies in place. And then there were employees who were really mad that we were tapping into their sick leave to keep their paychecks whole. They were very angry that they couldn't work. And instead of just giving them a paycheck, we were taking hours out of their, by the way, unlimited sick leave bank, right? And then we had other employees over here saying, well, they're not having to work. Why do I have to work? Why am I the one who's having to come in the office? So everyone seemingly was super pissed at me because I was a department of one. I was the first ever HR person. I was working very closely with the assistant town manager at the time. And here's the kicker, Jen. Every single night at 5 o'clock, I was pouring myself a double margarita. I would measure out the shots, 2 shots of tequila, and that I was looking forward to drinking every single night. So that was an extremely stressful time. And that went on for a while. I mean, that went on for, I don't remember how many months. That level of stress, that level of uncertainty, employees being mad, trying to figure out all the state regulations, and sort of like the world is ending, sort of a feeling, and varying levels of it in the organization. That was a wild time. That was burnout for sure, with unhealthy habits tapped in. What about you?
All these eyes, all these judgments, all these opinions, all these expectations, all this weight, right? Like I can feel you.
I mean, I am back there.
Talk, I can feel Yeah, because that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Say that again.
I am back. Like my heart rate is up right now. I'm literally flashing back to that time and how I felt, and it's coming up in my body again. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, for sure. Because it was real. And it's real now, right? Like there is no denying. I think, one of the things that we say with like, and we hear all the time with these things is like, all of the different tools and practices and things that we'll share here later on today that we can do within ourselves to help with burnout, to help with overwhelm. And yet, right? Like we are never going to be in control of things like that, right? And when something like that happens, right? Just imagine, all the weight that was putting on to you from a professional standpoint. Now come to think of the weight that you're being, that's put onto you because now you're having to work from home and figuring your office environment, and you're having to deal with, there's so many different things that are going on simultaneously. Of course, it's going to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to be overwhelming. And that, I think, is like something for me too. Like when I look back on my story was not that different than yours, but similar. It was a few years earlier. And it was after I'd moved up to Oregon, and I had said that I was in a huge unhappy job. So I ended up going out on my own and doing consulting for a little while at the time. And this was like in 2012, 2013, right? So at the time, this is when like Obamacare and like all of that stuff was really huge.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what I was really going for as a consultant. I'm like, I'm going to help businesses with their Obamacare.
Oh my God, I love you. I love you. I did not know that. Okay. Yes.
But it didn't go anywhere fast, right? And so that next job that I got was the job that I got with the hospitality group, and was one of the best jobs I've ever had, because almost fully because of a leader that I had who inspired me. I've talked about Don before. I'll talk about Don again. He was an amazing leader. And yet he reported to the owners of the organization. So the owners owned 4 different, hotel properties, along with restaurants and spas and all of that. And they were the quintessential, very, very tight, short pockets type of leaders, right? So when I came into the organization in 2014, they had 300 employees. And before I had gotten there, I may have talked about this before I had gotten there, they had not yet had anyone doing HR. And with 300 employees, it was a lot right off the bat, right? And so just like you, I managed my life through a lot of alcohol. I managed my life through a lot of heavy, hard living, and then trying to do my best with the circumstances as they were presented to me at the time, right? So your COVID situation, it's like, there's only so much we can do. And yet, we're choosing then these activities and these responses that then only cause us further suffering. Right. And it causes further pain. And so that was my pattern. That was my pattern at the time. And so it took me almost a full year of being in that environment where I was the only HR person for 300 people. And I literally could not have felt burnout more. And yet resolve, right? So in that role and at that time, I was so resolved because I believed in what I did. I believed in the leadership team around me. Like all of those things kept me pushing and kept me fighting for it. And yet, if I look back on 10 years ago, Jen, right? This was 2014. I should have ran as fast as I freaking could out of that situation. And yet we won't do it. The lights will be shining and glaring. The sound horns will be blazing. And yet we will continue to drink ourselves into a stupor, but get up the next day and put ourselves right back into the slop again. And so that was my pattern for about a full year at that time, until I finally got some extra support. And at that time it was 10 hours a week. And I was like, oh, take it.
Hell yeah. 10 hours a week? Yes. Because that's 10 hours you get back in your life.
10 hours. It was a start, and it was something to kind of help me pull me out of a really, really tough hole. And it was a hole that it's like, I think similar yet a little different than you, right? Like you kind of see a vision of what can be. So you're like, absolutely, I'm going to put everything I can into it. And yet you look around you and what's reciprocated. Where is the give and take, right? And in HR, we tend to not really pay attention to that. We're like, no, I'm just going to keep giving. Eventually it's gonna give, and that is just not a way to be able to live. And for me, I think I can look back on that version of myself with a lot of compassion, a lot of warmth, and be able to know she didn't know any better. She was just trying to do her best. She was just trying to be seen. She was just trying to be able to make an impact, climb the ladder, all of those things, right?
All of
And I
it.
can look
Yes.
back on it now and see how much detriment I was causing myself based
Yep.
on continuing to put into a situation that wasn't giving back. And I think that is a really, really tough thing for those of us who are suffering or who have suffered from burnout in the past, is that at what point do
Absolutely.
we stop giving and recognize the reciprocation? So,
I mean, you
okay, that
nailed it.
first
It's
question.
that give, 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 give. Give, give,
Yeah,
give, give, give. Yeah.
yeah. All
Yep.
right, question 2.
I'm
How
ready.
do you think the nature of HR work contributes to our high levels and stress and burnout that we see in our jobs?
Sure. I think that it's twofold for me. It's the nature of HR, right? Our job is to serve both the employee and the organization. And if we can't find that and, if we truly don't see it as an and, if we feel like we're caught in the middle, I think that absolutely contributes to our stress and our burnout.
Mhm,
If we feel as though, we are pulled in one direction, or we're perceived as being just for the organization, or we're showing up in that way, a situation. I mean, I even just think about COVID with, you can't work. Like the federal and state laws at the time were saying certain things. And even so, in HR, we feel as though it's kind of our fault. We feel as though
mhm,
because we are the one who's enacting, I think about policies on a smaller scale. We're the ones who stand for policy. We're the ones who educate on policy. And
mhm,
I think if we internalize it, we make it personal, which I think a lot of people in HR do. We just feel like we're the ones having to make these difficult decisions. We make it about us. And I also think compassion fatigue, truly. I think so many of us in HR care so very much about humans. It's why we go into the field. And it's almost a double-edged sword in that we give, we're selfless with the amount of compassion. And in some ways, that's very much related to poor work-life balance. It's so much do as I say, not as I do. And I feel as though a lot of HR people, we're the ones checking our emails before work. We're the ones who go into the office. And we go into the office instead of getting our morning workout in or getting our morning meditation in, because we just saw a quote unquote emergency and we have to address it right then. We have to be there for the people. We have to put everybody else before ourselves. And I personally experienced HR in that way time and time again. And I see it. I see it
mhm,
with my clients. I see it particularly with women in HR. And same goes to that, quote unquote, heavy workload in HR, that we are responsible for so many things, especially if we're a generalist, especially if we're a team of one. And that
mhm,
workload, that piling on, that, oh my gosh, now I have to do this employee investigation and it's open enrollment. How am I supposed to get everything done? This is the worst possible time this investigation came upon me. So I think for all of those reasons, it really impacts our psychological capacity in some ways.
mhm.
And we feel like we have to do everything all at once, and we can't. We just can't. And there is another way. And Jen, you and I have both experienced this other way, and we're on the other side of it, and we see it so clearly. And I think most HR professionals burn out because you just don't see it. And you and I have both been there. We just didn't see it. We just didn't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and, thank you for that. I mean, it's true, we didn't see it, and it's like you and I can sound a little bit like broken records in that
I
way,
know.
where we talk about, like, where we were and where we are, but at the
Yep.
same time, it really matters to talk about because there was just a recent, well, 2022, but recent in terms of research, but there was a recent study from SHRM
Yep.
that basically
Hmm.
said people in HR have said that in situations where they are, burnt out or struggle with burnout, it impacts their ability to be satisfied in their roles
Yeah.
71% of the time. 71% of the time. And that doesn't even go into some of those other studies that we've heard where it says 90% or 96% of people are burnt out in the field of HR compared to other industries since COVID, where it's closer to like 50%. Right.
Yeah.
So there's been a huge, huge shift in our industry. There's been a huge shift in the world of human resources and what it means to be in HR. And like, that was something that I really thought about, as I was prepping for this episode. I'm like, y'all, let's take a moment and let's just really recognize how much the world of HR has changed in the last
Oh
4
my
years.
gosh.
I was just watching a documentary last night on George Floyd. Right.
Uh-huh.
And it was a beautiful documentary and talked about like how we can keep things like this alive. Right. Like, I don't know about you. You and I have not talked about this, but like that summer of 2022, man, in terms of awareness and in terms of like really paying attention to the things that were right out in front of us for so long, everything changed. Right. And that's all it takes. Right. When you and I talk about like how far we've come and what we've done and da 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 da, you look at something like George Floyd, it really only takes truly an instant to be able to never be able to like see something the same way ever again.
Yeah.
And I really, really believe in the field of HR, it's kind of the same way. Not only when it comes to, race relations, inclusion, that sort of thing. I mean, think of the amount of weight it kind of brings to us in our fields now that we know what we know. You can't unsee, right? So you add that on with all of the other weight of us wanting to try to make these magnificent worlds in our in our organizations. So, I say this because I think we just need to take a pause more and give ourselves a freaking break. To give ourselves a break around the fact that there has been so much monumental change within the field of HR, and that we are like 99, I would say like 99% of us are still recalibrating from these changes that we've seen over the past few years. So, yeah, I mean, when I think of that question of like how much, stress and all these things have impacted in HR, yes, yes, and yes. And let's just really recognize we are still in a state of like flux in this world that we're in, and in HR in particular. So yeah, I just really want to be able to be a part of shifting the dial around job satisfaction in HR, around burnout in HR, around, all of it. And I think because of this flux, because of this rocky, turbulence we've been in over these past few years, we've got people leaving left and right. Like our poll in the HR groups this last week. So anyone who pays attention to our podcast knows last week we ended up doing authenticity and transparency. It was going to be burnout. We had a poll out there in the HR group, blew up, right? It blew up in terms of what people are overwhelmed with. They're overwhelmed with the people. They're overwhelmed with the management. They're overwhelmed with changes. It's so, so much. And I think that to me just really, really resonated to how much we are trying to navigate through. No wonder. Right? No wonder. So I'm going to end my piece with let's give ourselves a freaking break.
Yeah.
What about you, Catherine? Like, oh no, did you already answer that question on where you've seen? Yeah, never mind.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, moving on, unless you had anything else with that one before we move on.
No, my mind just went, well, yeah, I guess I do. Going back to the question about why is burnout so prevalent in HR?
Yeah.
And you have me thinking about Title VII.
Oh,
you have me thinking about, in HR, we stand for fairness and equity, period. And I served on a panel down in Denver at the Mile High SHRM conference. And the panelist next to me is not an HR professional. She's an amazing, wonderful, extremely intelligent PhD psychologist. And she was talking about an organization she consults for when it comes down to generational inclusivity is her specialty, I think. And she started talking about an organization who there are a few employees whose pronoun is they. And this organization made a decision to say they have to pick a pronoun. You have to pick if you are she or he. You cannot be they. They made an organizational, and I had a visceral reaction to that. As an HR practitioner, I stand for let people be human, whatever form that is. I don't care about your sexual orientation. I don't care about your gender. I just want you to be you in the workplace. I want you to feel loved. I want you to feel supported. And for me, that's what HR is. So I stand tall for all humans. My mother right now, well, since she was 65, she's 79 now, she's in a wheelchair. You know, she's not in a wheelchair full time, but she was in a wheelchair at my nephew's graduation. And it's just so interesting when someone you love is becoming older and they're quote unquote physically disabled now, and to stand for my mom as someone who needs to be in a wheelchair at a huge arena and a huge event, and how people look down upon her literally and figuratively, and how I may start crying, how she was treated. And I think that's why we go into HR. And I think there is some burnout there because we want to help everyone. We want the world to be fair. And that can be exhausting. Standing up for what's right all the time, especially when there's differing opinions on what's right. And I think about Roe v. Wade. I think about pro-choice versus pro-life. And if you're in HR and you're super pro-life or you're super pro-choice, I think that can cause a lot of burnout too. When your personal opinion is so staunch in a way. I don't know. Probably going off on left field, but I do think that I don't think it's a bad thing to be super passionate in your morals and your values. I do think it can lead to exhaustion and burnout. 100%. Interesting.
No, very, very interesting. And I think so right on too, right? Where there's that lack of alignment with maybe how we might be really feeling about something, and the directive, like the example that you gave. I mean, heartbreaking, right? Like if you're in a situation where with something that's come down, every HR person has been in that in one way or another, right? Like
right.
It comes down from the top and you're like, ooh, that doesn't sit right.
Yes. Yes.
And I gotta tell you, like, as you started talking about that, I'm like, that right there is actually, I think, an indicator of potentially being on a path to burnout, right? When we're not aligned and we're trying to kind of go with those marching orders, or we're trying to kind of move something forward that does not connect truly and deeply.
Therein lies the problem, right? It's like a value disalignment. If you stand tall for people who don't identify as male or female, and an organization is saying pick a pronoun, and you feel as strongly as I do, that's just one example. That resistance. And then what I would say in my coaching practice is be aware of that resistance and be more accepting. But how do you accept something that your values are just, you're not okay with? You're just not okay with. So, I think we nailed why HR's burned out.
Well, and that's really a bigger question that you and I have talked about before. And that I think everybody in HR, and really anybody who is, kind of in a career, needs to check in with themselves about, right? Am I aligned? Is there was this, a situation where I put myself into this job in this role out of, desperation or, whatever at the time. And
Yes.
now I can feel it,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
y'all, we can feel when we're not aligned, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of this bullshit that's coming out of our mouths where we're trying to help, trying to get everybody to think that we're
Yeah.
on the same page. Oh yeah, fine. Right. But at what point do we like go inside of ourselves and say, you know what, something's not right here. And I need to really explore this because it's just going to continue the divide. It's
Yeah.
just going to continue to make us, sour and, all of these things until we address it.
Yep.
So, ooh, all right. Well, what is the latest? I mean, what can you share in terms of what you're seeing out there? Latest research, insights. What can you share that can really help others who might be on the path or struggling with burnout?
It's so funny because I went to the Googles. I was like, I'm going to the Googles. I'm so interested because when I burned out and quote unquote left the HR field, it was 2 years ago, right? Now I'm a coach and a consultant. I am not in a traditional 9-to-5 HR role. And I was like, ooh, I really want to find out what the data says now. And what was coming up on the Googles? SHRM, the SHRM magazine. And it's actually April 30th of this year. It's an article by Matt Gonzalez, and it's called Here's How Bad Burnout Has Become. Here's how bad burnout has become at work. Okay.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend everybody go check out this article. I'm not trying to plug SHRM at all, but it was just super, super fascinating. Just the statistics about how 44% of us feel burned out, how 50% of us feel that a very strong sense of belonging in the workplace, but which also means 50% don't. And only 40% of us feel super, super fulfilled. And just there's some really, really interesting statistics. And they also quote the 2022 SHRM conference, which I was at down in New Orleans. Shout out to anyone else who's down there. I actually got conference COVID, by the way. I got super sick, got COVID, irony. But a woman named Terry Bogue from an Indianapolis based tech company talks about really these were her five main points. Try and maintain an optimistic viewpoint, reframe your perceptions, give yourself credit, be as healthy as possible, and find ways to limit your demands. So I'm going to be super honest here. I'm not seeing anything new coming out. I'm just not. I'm being super honest. I'm not seeing anything new, which in some ways is sort of relieving in a way, because what I am hearing is it comes down to you. It comes down to you as a human being, how you're showing up, what habits you have, what practices you have. Do you have healthy boundaries? Do you know how to say no? Do you know how to prioritize your workload? Do you know how to take a breath? Do you know how to eat very healthfully so that you are fueling your body in a way and you're not doing a double shot margarita at night to escape, right? I'm raising my hand for those of you who aren't watching this live. So my point being, I have not found anything that's like earth shattering. I'm being totally honest. There's nothing earth shattering. But what I am hearing is what Jen and I, and I'm speaking for both of us suddenly, what we know to be true. And it comes down to you. It comes down to how you show up. And it's not just having this knowledge of, okay, I know I need to practice healthy habits. It's actually practicing those healthy habits. It's putting your systems in place to treat your mind and your body and your spirit with so much love and so much respect and so much compassion, but actually doing it, not just knowing you need to do it, actually doing it. That's what I got, Jen. I'm dying to hear if you found something new and exciting, because I need to be reading it. What did you find? Tell me you found something new, please.
No, not really. I have a couple of studies just like you did, but at the end of the day, I mean, you and I both know all I have to do is sit, close my eyes, and really recognize, like you said, that it does start within ourselves. And there was a term that, as I was doing research for this episode, there was a term that I read that I think encapsulates this so much. And it's really around conscious incompetence. So here's what I want to offer, y'all. And
Yes.
love our people. I love you. I love all of this. And I think that we know, right? I think that there is a deep knowing within every one of us around what's not working. There's a deep awareness within every single one of us around what needs to change.
Yep.
There's this deep knowing. And so this consciousness around, where we're stretching ourselves thin, where we're pushing ourselves too hard, where we're not setting boundaries, where we're not delegating, where we're not communicating our truth, that at some point needs to be on us. And you can use whatever word y'all want to use around, instead of incompetence, right? But the idea is it's we're consciously choosing to what's the word I was thinking of? But it's really that consciousness around knowing our truth.
Yeah.
And being able to like do what needs to be done. And
Yes.
it's like I can spray at you a great study from 2019 from SHRM, by the way, around delegation. And that's a really great thing to consider doing. And I could spray another Harvard Business Review article all about like boundary setting and how setting higher boundaries leads to 25% at least reduction in burnout symptoms. Like all of these things are accurate and are true, but they must be driven by you.
Right.
They must be driven by that person, and they must come from like a true sense of why, why it matters, why, they would want to make those changes. But it requires change. To move from that incompetence place to truly being competent and capable requires movement.
Agreed.
And so it's like, that's the hard and short of it, is at the end of the day, nothing will change until we truly make those changes within ourselves.
Boom.
Right. Even changing the job and even changing the role and change, those things. I've seen it happen over and over again. I've seen, my husband, bless his heart, has found himself in roles where he's been bullied and mistreated for 30 years.
30.
Right? We will find ourselves in these roles over and over again until we are willing to do that work within ourselves to move ourselves out of that incompetent place and actually being able to gain consciousness around what we need to do to make the changes that need to happen.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. And I love that you point out that it's within us and it is individual. Don't be doing what everybody else is doing. It's a matter of pausing and getting to know yourself a little bit better and what actually works for you. Because if you're seeing this just happened, I just got an email from somebody in my life who I love dearly, and it was a work email at, I think it was 1:03 or 1:08 in the morning. And the first thing I did was I sat in judgment of that person. I was like, what are they doing up so late? Why are they sending that email so late? I'm just coming clean on my thoughts. And I was like, okay, but do you actually know that that person is burned out by sending that email, or they were overwhelmed? You don't know that. You do know this person loves his job. So maybe he's energized by that. Because it dawned on me, okay, this is through your lens. Because if you were sending an email at 1 a.m., it would mean that for me, Catherine Fry, it would mean I'm up ruminating. I had to get the email out. It was a way of me for processing. And it was just really, really fascinating. It was just a really, really interesting lesson in judgment, a lesson I keep learning over and over again. And what am I making that mean? Maybe it's when he does his best work, right?
Yeah.
So who am I to judge? I have to figure out what works for me. Stop worrying so much about the timing of his email and worrying about, like, he will know what works for him. And if he doesn't, he will ask for help. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And he really could have been super energized and having the time of his life. Why would I worry about that? I know that sending an email at 1 a.m. doesn't work for me. Yeah. It doesn't work for me. And that's okay. I have to know that about myself. I also have to know, heading into my 49th year this summer, that I can't work the way I used to. I can't wake up and look at emails and start worrying about work. I need time for myself in the morning. I need to actually take a lunch break. I know a lot of people work through lunch. I worked through my lunch for the majority of my 22 years. Not all, but the majority. Done work for me. I am so much more energized and more focused and produce better work after I take a lunch break. And I also need time in the evening. Like, I can't push the way I used to. And that's what works for me. No, we just have to experiment what works for ourselves. And it's almost like a self audit almost. Just take time. Take the time. And especially if you feel like I can't, you don't understand. I don't have the time. I can't take my foot off the gas. There's too much to do. That's exactly when the foot needs to come off the gas. It's like more so than ever. Seems counterintuitive, and that's actually what you need the most, I think, unless you're truly, truly loving it. But if you're like, oh my God, I don't love it, take your foot off the gas.
Absolutely. And like what you're saying about the emails at 1 a.m., I've been guilty of that as well on both sides, right? And it's like now that I have more self-awareness, I can really be able to look at something like that and not make meanings or judgments or feel like there's expectations around it. Like, that's, I think, where we get tripped up. It's not so much the dude up at 1 a.m. writing the email. I mean, that can just be what it is. And it's like, oh, poor Dawn, right? No.
Poor Dawn. I love that it comes back to Dawn. We got to get Dawn on this show. I'm telling you, I've got to meet this guy.
I love Dawn. But what we do know is we see that, and immediately the flood of oh no, do we need to get... That's what happens, right? It's the flood of anxiety that comes from someone else's choices that we then believe somehow impacts us in some way, right? Yes. And it's a mind frick.
It's a mind frick.
It's truly just such a mind thing, but it's not real. Like, now you can look back on that and be able to say, for whatever reason, that's what he needed.
That's what he did. Yeah.
To be able to do at that time. And for me, I'm going to be able to process that really well around 7:30.
Damn right.
Right. And
after one of these, after my big old mug of coffee, I'm good. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Well, let's kind of wrap this up. So I would love to hear your thoughts around how self-compassion is crucial when it comes to addressing our burnout. What have you found both personally and professionally?
I think for me, because I tend to be very hard on myself, so this one goes out for all the major self critics. And I see this in my clients too, because I tend to work with women just like me, very hard on ourselves, very high achieving, very driven, et cetera, et cetera. Once I realized it was my thoughts causing my own burnout, guess what? Beat myself up. Yeah. How could you not see this before the age of 45? How could you have been so blind that you were your thoughts and how you showed up at work and your emotions were the cause of your burnout. And I beat myself up. But the trick is self-compassion. The trick is to say, I did the best I could at the time with the information that I had. And that's it. And now I love harder on that version of myself, that 4 years ago version of me. And when I start having those thoughts of, how could I not see it? How do my clients not see it? It's just compassion for them. I'm meeting my clients where they are. And it's funny because I have a lot more humor in my life. I'm a lot happier because I feel more free. It's just, I can see so clearly now it was me. And instead of the self-deprecation, it's very freeing. It's the best news ever for me. It truly is. It's like this whole new lease on life. And it may sound super cheesy. The more rooted in it's everybody else, it's the job, it's the profession, it's COVID, it's everything outside. When we give our power away to the external sources, it's my boss, it's my coworkers, it's I have too much work to do. When we give our power away in that way, the harder it is to actually see the power we have in ourselves. And again, if it sounds super cheesy, it probably just means that you are doing exactly what I did for 45 years. I was giving my power away. And once you realize, oh, it's in the thoughts I have. Oh, it's in the way I'm showing up. And you actually start to work on your thoughts and you start to literally work on your practices of self-care, really figuring out what works for you. That's huge. And I do think you have to have a lot of compassion for yourself. And when I just start to laugh at myself, it brings so much levity and so much more joy to my life that, I mean, I just walked around like a little stress ball for 45 years. I really did. I was hardwired this way since I was a tiny, tiny little tot. I was so serious growing up. I mean, I just have stories of the 5th grade when we were doing a mock debate. And I stood up in front of my entire 5th grade class and I said, this is not funny. And the whole class erupted in laughter because I was so effing serious all the time. And now I just realized that I have a lot of compassion. When I notice myself getting really serious, I just start to laugh. And my clients do the same thing. They're like, oh my gosh, I just see myself so differently. I see that I'm contributing to my burnout 100% of the time. And I get to choose to show up differently. So I think self-compassion is huge. It's almost everything. What do you think?
Wow. Like I'm speechless. That was so beautiful. That was so well said, Catherine. No, truly. Like I'm like sitting here going, you just pretty much summarized so much, I think, of my professional experience. Truly, like deeply, deeply wanting to like be able to, put off this an energy of positivity is one of the things that I've always really, really tried really hard to do, right? And it's like so much so that I was like suffering and screaming inside, but yet I felt like that was what we needed to do in HR, right?
So interesting.
Yeah. And so part of like what you were saying about being funny and being light and that sort of thing, I've force fed. Now it's natural. And now I now have been able to kind of see that truth through, like you're saying, really recognize so much was about me, right? It wasn't about the other people and about the other things and about this and about that. Once I truly loved myself and once I truly had compassion for myself when I stumbled, right? Or when I screwed something up.
Yeah.
That was everything. But it's just so wild to hear as you were talking earlier, because that resonated so strongly with me, of this need to feel like I had to project outwardly this positive or bubbly or this or that. And really, I think when I reflect and I look back on that, I'm really thankful that I pushed myself to try to project whatever it was, because it helped me in certain ways kind of come to this truth about myself that really I was the only one who could actually have that be real. And when it finally then became natural and real, it's like I now, and I've talked about this before, I now show up as my full true self every single day as an HR manager. And this is a new thing for me.
Same.
And it takes a lot of work. It's not like it's like a free ride and it's easier. It actually is harder. And yet it's so worth it.
Yeah.
It's so worth it. And yet, you know, it's like here we are like talking about like how we pushed against for 42, 45, whatever the years are, pushed against like thinking that we needed to be this other thing when really it's like being exactly ourselves, but being truthful about it, setting those boundaries, delegating when we can, doing the things that actually are honest is gonna be exhausting. It's gonna take some energy. But boy, on the other side of that is the rewards fruitful. So thank you so much for saying that way better than I know that I did, but it was like perfectly said. And I'll say that one of my favorite books of all time, along with It's Not You, is Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. If you haven't read it, if you haven't listened to it, it was a transformative read for me. So Dr. Kristen Neff, I think, is just one of the primary researchers on compassion. And so hearing her take on self-compassion in particular was just beautiful. So
you know, I'm a big, like, I'm always, well, maybe not on this podcast. When I am presenting at SHRM conferences or when I am doing trainings for organizations, I am constantly quoting authors. So I'm getting that book. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Love it. Thank you for my next read after I finish It's Not You.
Anytime. And listeners and viewers, if you have any reads for Catherine and I, you know we're geeks. You know we're nerds.
Proud geeks.
We would love to know your recommendations. And I feel 150% sure that there are other listeners and viewers too who would love to hear your recommendations. So share them in the comments. We'd love to hear them. So last question. What message of hope or encouragement would you like to share with our listeners who might be struggling with burnout right now?
I'm going to be super direct. You can get past it. You have to go right through it. On the other side of all of this consternation and pain and emotional turmoil and brain drama is a very peaceful, amazing existence in the HR field. Truly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a matter of going deeper inwardly and sort of flushing out all that's not working for you because it's within you. And again, it's the best news ever because once you flush it all out and once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. And you get to show up in a non-burned out, less stressed way. I'm not saying the stress goes away, but burnout is a result of compounded, unmanaged stress. And it's just a matter of showing up differently and getting to know yourself differently. Truly, it's the coolest. It's the coolest life experience I've ever had, ever. What about you, Jen?
Yes, everything that you said, 100%. And finding ways to get out to be able to talk it out. It can be to others, it can be to a journal, it can be to yourself on a mountaintop. But I think that what we need to do when we get ourselves in high stress, overwhelming situations, we need to talk it out. We need to talk it through. We need to be able to have a release in some way. And so one of the things that I've really, really realized is like when it comes to like taking care of ourselves, this is one of those things that I don't think we realize how much we need as a self-care tool. And that is around the release, right?
Mm,
And being able to like get out what we're bottling up, even if it's messy, right? And I think that like for those of us who are women in HR, that might be part of why it's so hard and why we keep it bottled up so freaking tight, is because once it pops open, we're terrified. There's a
yeah.
terror around what actually is going to come out if we unleash what's bottled up. And yet, what we don't realize is if we find different outlets to be able to do that a little bit more, find a journal, find something to be able to bring those outlets to life. You're going to find then, like you were talking about, Catherine, that ability to be able to see our thoughts more clearly, to see
Mm,
our craziness, that goes on within ourselves more clearly. That's how it's done. That's how it happens, is through that ability to be able to either brainstorm with another or journal and go back and read and say, what is
mm.
this foolishness I've been writing? What
Yep.
is this foolishness I've been thinking? And why am I thinking
Yes.
it? And is it necessary?
Right.
You know, because these are the types of things that you and I know that work. And for many of us, it's just that discomfort of getting to that point where we start actually becoming aware of the foolishness that we're thinking about ourselves and the foolishness that we're thinking about the world around us. So until we can start breaking that down, whether that's with others or on our own, it's always going to be bottled up. So yeah, I think you and I have like a perfect balance, right? Is like really being able to like, once you've kind of opened that latch, finding that safety, finding that comfort, and finding that ability to be able to come into our own truth about what's real, and then building from there,
Mm,
and what it can look like. Because that's, I think you and I know more than anything, is once we've really been able to kind of break through the mess that was going on in our minds, that's when the true magic can happen, when we start asking ourselves the real question of, what do we want it to be?
mm-hmm.
How do I want it to be the next time I'm overwhelmed with stress? Because you will be overwhelmed with stress again. That's never going to go away in our lifetimes. It's really about how we react to it and respond
You
to it.
got it. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we want to show up?
How
Literally
we
and
want to show up.
figuratively.
Yeah. Well,
Responding
Kathy,
versus reacting. I love it.
any final thoughts before we wrap up today's episode?
I mean, I I know we've talked about this in other episodes. I think that there's so much research on writing, like literally handwriting and getting things down on paper, because once we get them down on paper, we can see, okay, what do I actually want to put back in my brain? And I think as women specifically, we have a tendency to verbally blah to trusted people in our lives, right?
Wait. Verbally blah.
Blah. Yes, this is a new technical term. Verbally blah.
I love that.
BLAH, verbally blah, right? But here's the thing. We talk so often about who we surround ourselves with matters. And if you're
Yeah.
verbally blahing, right, you're getting it out. But then that person in your life, that trusted person, whether it's a best friend, whether it's your work spouse, whether it's your real spouse, whoever it is, if they sit with you and say, oh, yeah, you're totally justified in feeling that way, you're just recycling it and putting it back into your brain and back into your body and back into your life. You have to get that shit out and then pick up something new. If you're continuing if you are being really honest with yourself and you're continuing to have the same emotions, the same stress, the same burnout, the same overwhelm, it's because you're recycling the same thoughts. You have to choose new thoughts, new sounding boards. Be very, very conscious of the people that are in your life. And if they're helping you bring in new thoughts, bring in new approaches, bring in new ideas that actually work for you, great. If you're not, I'm not saying remove them from your life. Just be very present and and conscientious, going back to Jen, what you were talking about, what your release method is and what your intake method is.
Mm-hmm.
Be very, very conscientious of that. That's the only other thing that came into my mind.
Yeah. No, and that's a huge one, right? Because so many of us are, we're very accustomed to the work groups that we're in or the different ways that we go about venting or
You got
lying,
it.
whatever it is. And so it's like, can we really put a pause in that every once in a while and say, is this really serving me? Are they flooding me with, kind of ideas and helping me to progress? Or are these individuals or the situation flooding me and causing me only to continue to feel stuck?
Oh my God.
Right. And those are so, so important. And when it comes to some of our closer relationships, girl, you're hitting the nail on the head there. And it's so critically important that we do become really aware of what that looks like and then consciously make those attempts little by little to open that up and find those others, whether it be in person, whether it be Mel Robbins, Jay Shet, you've got mentors out there. We've got
Oh
them
my
out
gosh.
there. We don't necessarily have to have them in front of us to be able to have people who can help fuel us and move us in their direction that we want to go. Well, all right. Well, with that, I just want to thank you, Catherine, again for such a good conversation. We
Always,
always
Jen.
end up having so much depth and breadth in our conversations. So everyone, I want to thank you so much for listening, for watching. And if you haven't already, please make sure to download the Thrive and Shine HR podcast. Please make sure that you are getting your most out of it. We are episode 18 now, and it just continues to get better and better and better. So thank you, Catherine, for everything today.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Always fun. I cannot start my Mondays off without you. So always great. Thank you so much.
Love it. All right. And with that, thank you, everyone. And with every day is a wonderful opportunity to thrive and shine in HR. Have a great week, everybody.